Good afternoon or good morning, depending on which part of the globe you're based in. Thank you for joining me today. I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes as attendees pile in online. So bear with us, and we'll give them hopefully 60 more seconds to get going. And yeah. So right, guys, we'll make a start. We've got a good number of attendees from lots of different organisations. So the format for today is I'm going to speak for about half an hour, and then we'll leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for you to ask questions. However, if you do have a question throughout, please raise your hand. And I'll do my best to, and a virtual hand that is, and I'll do my best to try and answer that question as we're going through, or as I said, I'll try and answer it at the end of the session. The focus really today is around the business case for supplier management. So I'll start with a quick introduction to State of Flux. Hopefully most of you know who we are, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on it. And then I'm going to throw a poll for yourselves to just so I understand where you are in your supply management journey, most specifically around your business case focus. So we've got two polls today. The first one is after my first three slides, and then we'll kick into the real content. So without further ado, I'm going to race through. For those of you who don't know State of Flux, we are a supplier management organization and supplier management technology called Supplier Base. And you can see that on the circular picture there, which focuses on SRM, performance, onboarding, risk, innovation, contract, and ESG. We also, and we're very well known for our supply management consulting and helping organizations start or improve their supply management programs. And we have a globally accredited training curriculum on both supply management and procurement, and also interestingly on how to sell to procurement for the sales ones, which is becoming increasingly important as a number of our suppliers really are coming unstuck, not knowing how to deal with us as a procurement organization or industry. And then finally, for a number of clients, we actually run and operate some of their supply management activities. So, and the interesting thing is, for the last 14 years, so you'll see 13 books up there, that we're in the middle of the 14th global survey. So we've done these global surveys. We've had over 3,000 organizations participate, gives us over 3 million data points. If you haven't done the survey, I'm going to talk to you at the end of the session to encourage you to do the survey. You get a free benchmark of where your program is, but it's just a great yardstick to understand what you need to do to improve your supply management program. The sort of clients we work with, as I said, we're supplier management experts, and we go across industry. So we don't really focus on any particular industry, but hopefully you'll see some large names in the industries that you sit in. And we certainly also, when we do the research, break our results and can break our results into the different industry sectors. So without too much, I'm going to throw a quick poll at you and get you to hopefully give me a quick answer. So vote away while you can. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'll keep encouraging you to vote. I'm watching the stats. It's pretty interesting stats coming through. So if you haven't voted, I think there's about a few of you left to vote. If you can, please. We'll try and work that into the business case discussion further in this. I'm going to close in 30 seconds. So last few clicks, if you could. Right, I will close it. Anyone last responses? Click now. And we've closed. So hopefully, if you look on the side of your screen, you'll see the results. Just over half of you already have an SRM program in place or supply management program in place, but it needs further improvement. And then it's pretty neck and neck in terms of it's new for your business or it's stalled and needs to be restarted. So interesting picture. What we find is starting a SRM program is much easier than restarting one, and we'll come to that, but a lot of that's getting over the organizational cynicism. So yeah, we'll pick up these as I get to the business case, to the meat of the slides, if you will. So to start off, and some of you hopefully have seen this before, I'm going to start off with a definition of supply management, and we talk about a discipline of working collaboratively with suppliers that are vital to the success of both organizations to maximize mutual value of those relationships. So a couple of points to pull out on, and I've pulled 6 out here, but the first one is, discipline. It's got to be structured, it's got to be rigorous, it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be measurable. Often we see, hopefully you can still see my screen. Often we see supplier management programs where it's relying on the individual to do a great job with a particular supplier or a group of suppliers. That's not what I would define as industrial strength supplier management. What we really need is a repeatable process that if someone leaves, the process remains and it becomes part of how you do business. So just to highlight that one, another one that I wanted to pick out was that vital to success. So it's not just any old relationship. We need to think about the treatment strategies of our suppliers. So which ones are strategic, which ones are critical, maybe the diverse and inclusive suppliers, maybe the innovative suppliers. So different approaches for different suppliers, but they all need to be vital to the success of the business. Clearly, the local pizzeria down the road for when people are working late is not vital to the success of the business. So yeah. So I just pulled out a few of those things just so we're all on the same page on certainly what we refer to as supply management. And then the other thing is, after 18 years of working on supply management programs, and I won't read out all of these, but I will pick a few. I just wanted to highlight the key challenges that we see across people's supply management programs. And the top one, not defining and communicating what supply management is and what it means for your business. So that value proposition or business case, number one. And then you'll see not having a well-defined value proposition and the sales pitch. And as I said, I've got a poll coming up on sales pitch. And then I think the big problem that we have in procurement as an industry is rushing straight to process and not realizing that supply management is a business change program led by procurement, not a procurement change program. I'll repeat that. It's a business change program led by procurement, not just a procurement program. When you take that into account, it really does change your approach on how you need to engage the business, how you need to involve the business, how you need to get sponsorship from the business, how you need to get time investment from the business, how you embed it into the business role. And you'll see again, another procurement problem is that we want to own the relationship rather than just the process, policies, training, and getting to the point that the business can own the relationship. We just tell them how to manage it. So a couple of points there. I will flag that we will share the slides after this, so you don't need to scribble down the video, and slides will be made available on our website for you to view. Again, hopefully a number of you have read our books in the past where we talk about the 6 pillars of supply management. These 6 pillars, we've worked on for a number of years, and what we find is these underpin everyone's supply management. So to get it right, you need to work on all 6, not just 1 or 2, all 6 of these pillars to make your supply management program work. So just again to highlight a few, and clearly the one we're focusing on today is around that value pillar, around your business case, making sure it's aligned to strategic objectives and making sure it's delivering against those objectives. But again, a couple of highlights. It's amazing how many programs we see on the engagement pillar where people forget that suppliers are a key stakeholder to engage. So those are the 6 pillars. I won't spend a huge amount of time on them, but they do run through. And when you take this year's survey, which of course you all will, your results will be played against these 6 key pillars. And we have a standard journey to help roll out these 6 key pillars. And again, you'll see that we're actually focusing on this step here: create the business case with the value proposition development. There is some work that can and should be done prior to this around where are you right now, where do you want to get to, and understanding whether you're a customer of choice for your key suppliers. So those 2 things for me are a key input into your value proposition. But I'm happy to spend more time on this journey during the Q&A because it's potentially quite a large part of our discussion. So for this webinar, I'm going to focus on 3 areas, in particular the first and the third one, because the supply management strategy really, as I said, it comes as an output from the voice of the supplier, measuring whether you're a customer of choice, and also the understanding where you are now and where you want to get to. So we call that the current state assessment. So in terms of value proposition, what we're looking for is, first one is defining that supplier management, what it means to you and your organization. Can you create a clear line of sight between your business objectives and your supplier management objectives? And we're often seeing, especially in the current environment, business objectives are quite disconnected to what we're trying to do in terms of supply management. Hopefully, things like COVID, things like the Ukraine war, things like the Suez Canal challenge are all creating kind of lead indicator or business cases for us to align those business objectives to supply management. But we need to make that connection, and we'll come to that. So I've got a bit of a question here that I'm going to pop up on another poll. Let me see if I can do that. And this is whether you've created a sales pitch for your supplier management program. So if I can get you to put your hands on your keyboard and have a go at voting around, do you have a sales pitch? So it's on the right hand side of your screen, or hopefully, and you just need to vote. And don't worry, there's no problem if you haven't created a sales pitch, but we're kind of interested if you have, whether you've communicated it and where have you communicated it to. I'll give you kind of 30 more seconds. Those last few of you to click away. As I said, no problem if you haven't. In fact, all right, last couple of seconds. If you could just, if you haven't voted, please do so. And I will close the survey in 3, 2, 1 and share these results. So it's pretty neck and neck. Hopefully you can see the screen. 35% have said yes, but just communicated it to a core team, and 31% are saying no, but I need to. And then we're completely even around 15% yes communicated to all of the business versus yes just to procurement. And I'll come back to it. Supply management is a business change program led by procurement. So we can see where we need to head to. But clearly there's some work to do. The good thing is that 2/3 of you have created a sales pitch for supply management. And I will come to the importance of that and how you do it. When we did the survey, and this is last year's results, so clearly this year's results are being worked on. It was about half in terms of people that had created a value proposition and those who hadn't. So a lot of people had created the value proposition, but they were struggling to put it into a business case. And clearly that's the point of this presentation. So we will get to that. I just want to speak a little bit around this value proposition because it's pretty crucial to the success of your program. So in terms of once you've articulated what supplier management is and the value you're expecting to get to it, clearly you're trying to align it and tune it to the organization's goals and objectives. A quick tip on this, and I do have this on a slide later on, but for me, what we try and do is align it to the corporate goals. And I often get that from your annual report. There's always a statement from both the chairman and the CEO around where you're heading and what the key goals and objectives are for the next financial year. And tying it into those makes a huge deal. So that's at the high level in terms of that sales pitch. Then what you've clearly got to do is then fine tune it to make it resonate for different parts of the organization. So how do you tune it to either functional parts of the business, so legal, marketing, manufacturing, etc., depending on the business you're in, or do you tune it to business units or groups? So it could be either a geographical group, Europe, Middle East, Africa, whatever, or it could be an operational group. So what we say is once you've got your kind of high level pitch, and I've got some slides on this, then how do you get your kind of messaging house underneath it? So give me a couple of slides and we'll talk about a messaging house in a minute. And then finally, you fine tune it to the individual and make sure that it resonates with their goals and objectives in terms of that sales pitch for supplier management. I'm laboring this because as procurement professionals, we aren't very good at selling the value that we bring. So yes, we need to create the business case, but equally we need to sell the value that we get. And when I mentioned earlier that we do some training for sales organizations. If procurement was a sales organization, we would practice our supplier management proposition, and we would rehearse it, and we would probably video it and critique ourselves until we were all aligned and we all got it consistent across our organization. If you stand back, how do we expect the business to buy into the change that we're talking about when we're not consistent in what we're selling to them? So we need to come up with a consistent, what is supplier management? What is the value that you're going to get from it? And why do you need to invest time, effort, money? And that needs to be consistent. So everyone in our procurement function needs to be able to articulate that to engage the wider stakeholders and the suppliers. So this is pretty critical to get right across these stakeholder groups. I mentioned a messaging house. So clearly, it's a similar way of highlighting the same message, where you create your hero message. So that's your 20-second sales pitch, and then you've got your focus points, stakeholder challenges, needs, and proof points. So it boils down to, we call it 22-20, your 20-second pitch, your 2-minute pitch, and your 20-minute pitch. So how do you actually create that and have your teams being able to articulate supplier management? Please, I'll reiterate, throw questions up on the board. I'm conscious of time, so I am racing through these slides because I really want to get to some of the meaty bits around numbers and business case that we see coming from the research we do each year. So I talked about creating an as-is and a to-be, and this is that supplier management strategy. We use a current state assessment, which is similar to the annual global surveys, but we go in and evidence what people are doing, and we look at people, process, technology, as well as executive engagement and suppliers. And for the suppliers, we look at, are you a customer of choice? Which I think is fundamental to getting your supplier management program right. Do you understand why a supplier will give you preferential pricing, give you the A-team, give you the scarce resource? So those two things, the current state assessment and measuring whether you're a customer of choice, are critical to creating that kind of current state. And then clearly we want to define where we want to get to as well. So we've got the value proposition and we've got the supplier management strategy in terms of your program. I will point out that we noticed through our research that getting a sponsor for your program is a crucial element for it. So the sponsor shouldn't be your CPO. It should be someone as close to CEO as possible. When we look at the supplier management leaders, it's those people who have a sponsor normally at the first line of the CEO's reports. So CEO or close to it. And I will, Steve, thanks for your question. I will come to that around the hard numbers, but yes, generally we want to be trying to report hard numbers against a hard business case, but I will come to that in a few slides if that's okay. In fact, wait no longer. Hopefully, a number of you have seen this graph. We've been producing it. You see the copyright is 2017. We first produced this particular version of the graph. But what we've seen over certainly the 13 years and year 14, which we're in the middle now, is showing us that this seems to be consistent, that supplier management leaders, so those organizations that are good at supplier management, will typically get between 3 and 6% benefit over and above what they've already contracted. That's a big number. Now, clearly you can't do that with everyone, but between 3 and 6% is definitely worth going after, especially as we've all seen that strategic sourcing savings in this environment are becoming harder and harder to get. Actually getting that value is fantastic. Now, this is where business case gets kind of interesting, because you can use that number for it, but you'll see that the next line down, we talk about between 30 and 50% of incremental value was not being delivered by procurement. So what we mean by that is between a third and a half of all your deals done aren't always hitting the bottom line, which is pretty scary. So now the challenge with that is you've already counted that saving. So to go back to the business and say, well, actually, we're not getting it, sometimes is a difficult conversation. But what we see, and it's highlighted in the graph, is that if you notice that the sourcing and the strategic sourcing will get you a number. To grow that number, we need supplier relationship management, and performance management will give you continuous improvement, so it will give you some growth. Contract and risk management keeps it consistent. But we also see that if you beat up the supplier too much, then actually you'll get a short-term gain, but a long-term loss. We've sort of jokingly said that suppliers are like elephants and that they remember. Excuse me. They certainly, certainly will try and crawl back any gain that you think you may have made over time. And you'll see that sort of over 25% of organizations get 6% return on investment for supplier management. And virtually all the supplier management leaders are getting both financial and non-financial benefits. So my next page is about non-financial benefits. And there's a number here, and I haven't put the stats on this particular page, but I'm going to read some of them out. What we've noticed over the 14 years in terms of the numbers is that the hard numbers, the 3 to 6%, have been pretty consistent over that 14 years, or 13 plus the middle of this year. What's really interesting is the gap between we call them the customer choice benefits, between leaders and followers, has gotten wider and wider over that. We know that if you're good at supplier management, you're twice as likely to get the A team. You're twice as likely to get scarce resource. You're twice as likely to get preferential pricing. You're 3 times likely to get access to innovation. And the real big one for me, you're 5 times likely to get faster speed to market through new products or services through your suppliers. 5 times. So the customer of choice side of it is hugely beneficial. Very difficult to put financial numbers around it, but quite key, I think, in terms of your business case. So clearly the 3 to 6% is quite key, but the softer side around value proposition. So is it hard to make that case? You know, we're seeing, nearly half of all the leaders, it's 4% or more. As I said, over 25% for 3%, half the leaders 4%. We've given you a few industry pieces around here. If you're an oil and gas organization, cost and risk benefits are achieved for over 60%. Cost reduction for high tech. risk for financial services. Clearly, that's a key driver. I won't call them all out, but as I said, we will share that. But public sector are getting benefit, and we'll see that 2/3 of supply management leaders get far more positive negotiation outcomes through supply management. So those are better, faster, and more effective negotiations. And it makes sense because you know the relationship better, you know the organization better. And so here are some of the stats from the latest research in terms of risk management reduction. You'll see that these are the drivers that people are using in their business case. So most people are using risk, which makes sense given COVID, but we're also seeing quite a lot around cost reduction or cost avoidance, and quite a lot around sort of continuous improvement. So these are the business drivers behind it. And how do we turn these into the business case? Well, clearly what we've just seen in terms of that 3 to 6% and the customer of choice benefits. And you'll see that the leading programs that we see look at both. Hopefully you're all throwing questions up for me for the end of the session, and apologies I can't see them whilst I'm presenting, but I will pause in hopefully a couple of minutes to then go through it. Some of the tips that I would like to give you around your creating your business case. Finally, supply chain disruption risk and resilience is high on pretty much every board's agenda. They're now, it's supply chain risk is now mentioned in the press almost on a daily occasion. It's often, for a long time there during the pandemic, it was definitely mentioned in the news, on television, radio, etc. So our stocks are high. We're getting the audience. We've got to use it. We're still seeing the hangover from COVID. The port and the physical supply chain constraints, the war in Ukraine are still leading to disruptions, which still require closer relationships with your suppliers. So getting that articulated to your board and then highlighting those numbers that I've just run through are going to be pretty key. The one thing that came out of last year that I love was that 80% or roughly 80% of organizations relied on the supplier relationship to mitigate supply chain disruption during COVID, but only 12% of organizations have made it into the supply management leadership group. So if you think you're good at supply management, I hate to tell you, you probably aren't, because it's only a very small group that are actually making good progress against those 6 pillars that we talk about. Yes, that number's gone up ever so slightly over the years, but not fast enough. We need to put time, effort, investment into our supply management, which hopefully is why you're all on this call. But I thought this was a pretty key stat to throw at some of your executives to say, look, we're all relying on the relationship to get us through these disruptions, but it's not consistent. It's not industrial strength. All those things I mentioned at the beginning. And then finally, don't waste a good crisis. We've got one. Let's use it to make our case for change. So when you are aligning your business case, and I talked about those numbers, what we see is there's 4 key drivers that you can center your business case on. And it doesn't need to be all 4, it could be just one of them. But clearly risk and resilience is one, and it's pretty much top of the tree at the moment. In the past, it's been value, and how do you get more value out of your suppliers? And if those of you on this call haven't read last year's book, the whole focus of last year's book was value. The year before was innovation, and funnily enough, this year is going to be around risk and resilience. So I think the year before that for innovation for us was sustainability. So there are books available where you, for free to download from our website on all three of these topics, and the risk one will be this year's one. But I would orientate my business case around one or more of these 4 key pillars to create that case. And you'll see from the numbers, and if you didn't catch them, if I went too quickly on the numbers, I'm happy to talk about them in more detail on a one-to-one basis, and happy to share those numbers for you. But those are the four kind of key organizational objectives that we're finding people can align their business case with. Oops, sorry. So hopefully I've covered very rapidly these 3 key points. My summary is kind of explore all the value and create that sales pitch, and make sure you engage all stakeholders, understand your current state or as is, and very much get that customer of choice measurement done with your suppliers. And then finally, the business case is around, tying in those numbers to get sign off. So you would create the need for cash and support and resource, and then you create the driver behind it in that point. And I will finish with, and I mentioned earlier that the survey is now live. You can get both your score versus, and this is an example that we did with Financial Foundation for Strategic Sourcing members, so that they could compare themselves against other organizations and then against the CPG market. But we're happy to give your score versus your industry score and the leaders and the followers, so that you can see where the gaps are in terms of those 6 pillars of supplier management. And it gives you an overarching SRM index score. And our old friend Rick Hughes, who was the former CPO of Procter & Gamble, was a big fan of the supplier management survey in his heyday. Fantastic guy, Rick. So don't take my word for it. Please make sure you utilize that. As I said, it's free. We tell you it takes you about 20 minutes. It probably will take you about half an hour. So if you can do it, and I think the link is on the chat. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to try and answer some questions. But we will also open the lines up so that if you do have a question, just pop your hand up, and we will do our best to answer any questions that you may have. And I see, Steve, you had one around mentioning hard numbers. Sorry, we've got lots. Let me just. So the question is, when supply management is grouped in with P cards, risk contracts, supplier diversity, and countless other initiatives, it's quickly deprioritized. Do you, 1, see industry differences? Have you recommended recommendations to evaluate supply management as a core and enhanced capability? Thank you. Yes, I think, and this is the key point about tying it into the business objectives and getting it on the executive's radar. For me, I see it much more important than the other drivers, because I see this is kind of where we as a procurement function need to operate. I think the old RFP tender process is dying or dead. I'm struggling to see the value that we create out of RFPs and tenders now. I think where we as an industry now need to focus our time and effort is understanding our customers, our internal customers' needs, understanding the market and the suppliers and the supplier management. So those 2 ends of the process, the tender for me is an admin function now, and running an RFP or a tender is really like running a big survey. So I think we have to do it. And I think it's about getting that sales pitch right. I think it's about getting into the right stakeholders. And I think it's about having a supply management leader that's focused on selling the program, not the minutiae of the process. I think that's where we, as a procurement industry, fail, is that we tend to focus on minutiae of process because that's what we've done in the past, rather than selling the overarching program and the benefits of it. Hopefully that answers your question, Karen, but I'm more than happy to run a separate session. Frank asks, and I think it's similar sort of questions. How do you not only raise awareness but a desire to take action? What do we need our people to start doing? Yeah, really good question. I think one of the things that I've found on selling these big programs is, one, there's the simple thing of creating the business case. You know, is it a you know, when you do your cost benefit analysis, is it a slam dunk? And what we've seen is the cost of putting in a supplier management program is minute compared to the potential benefits. I talk to 3 to 6%, but for a lot of the programs, when we do the initial business case, we're looking at 0.5% benefit, and that still blows the costs well out of the water. The numbers generally with the large relationships that your organizations have, the numbers that can potentially be saved or the value that can be extracted far outweigh any of the kind of input costs. So that's part of it, but the other half is, you know, when you're selling it, people buy stories, and people often will buy a story about, typically an embarrassing one. If you can position a story within your organization of something that happens with one of your suppliers. You know, we had a client that used to give £1 million away for charity, but when we looked into it, in fact, it was 1.3 million to charity. But when we looked into it, 300,000 of that 1.3 went to another organization to tell them who to give the $1 million to, which just didn't make sense. Now, that was tiny in terms of their overall spend and visit spend, but it was tiny. But the business case, when we highlighted that to the board, it really resonated, the need to get better control around managing suppliers and what they were doing and how they were doing it. So often it's not just the hard numbers, it's coming up with those stories or those embarrassing cases that resonate with the board, that really get them over the line. And it sounds funny, but it's quite crucial. Next question was, what are the main elements to be covered when trying to, I didn't quite catch all that. I'll skip that one because it's not fully formed, that question. Whilst procurement see SRM as a priority, there seems to be a priority gap across the rest of the business. What are some of the options? Absolutely. We find it's quite easy to get the executive team or the board bought into the need to manage critical or strategic suppliers better, or just suppliers better, full stop. But where the program is really challenging is getting that executive or that middle management buy-in, and that's where your business case really needs to be tuned to their needs and drivers. It's the middle management that you've got to sell on that. I'm just going to pick a few more because I'm conscious that we're pretty much out of time. Karen, I think we could pick up the risk question separately. I'm more than happy to do that. And Chris, again, happy to pick this particular question up around SRM requires additional operational resource to support. Yes, often it does when we start to look at, do we need joint account, do we need account managers or supplier account managers on that? And again, we can talk about the cost of that, but typically it's kind of headcount cost. We would normally talk about for your top 20, you're probably looking at an average of one person per 3 to 5 suppliers. And you can work out the cost of an individual to do that, but that's the sort of metrics that we look at. Yeah. So unless there's any other questions, I'm happy to pick up some of the ones that came in towards the end. I know there was quite a lot. Or equally, if anyone has any further questions, please please shout out to me, and I will happily take the time to answer those questions. Otherwise, I will thank you so much for all your time, effort, and I will encourage you to complete this year's supplier management survey if you haven't already. And I'll also encourage you to contact me so that we can talk through numbers specifically to your industry and your organization to help with those business case. Ironically, that's why we started doing the supplier management survey in the first place, was to start using those numbers for these business cases. So as I said, we've got nearly 3 million data points, so please contact us. They're available for you to use them in your business case. Otherwise, I'll wish you a great day, and I'm going to stop the session now. And please, I'll look forward to hearing from you and speaking to you about your supplier management programs as you go forward. Thank you.